I went through undergrad on a sports medicine degree. I thought I wanted to be an athletic trainer, but I put that as a stepping stone for physical therapy school. But I always had this driving passion for performance, strength conditioning. But at the time, the NSCA was very new, and it turned out that I got most of my strength conditioning experience at University of Miami. And there were so many people lined up in the training room there at the Miami Hurricanes when Jimmy Johnson was the football coach taping ankles. I said, I already know how to tape ankles. I'm not going to stand in line to tape ankles at D1. I went around the corner and a guy named Bill Ferran was running the weight room. I think Bill is still heavily involved with the Miami Heat as an NBA strength coach. The first book that I actually published, the functional movement screen, it was in Bill Ferran's book, High Performance Sports Conditioning. It's chapter 2, and it's largely unchanged from there. But I actually became a strength coach and a physical therapist the very same year. And so my standard line is I was credentialed to both comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable the very same year. What I realized being dual credentialed is so much gets lost in transition between successful rehabilitation and successful performance enhancement. But the part where I thought I could maybe change the world or send a ripple through my two loved professions was to realize that a system of checks and balances makes the performance coach responsible for not creating unnecessary side effects that could compromise durability. And it also makes the rehabilitation professional responsible for giving you back a pre-injury body whenever possible. There's two times when we must think about patterns and not parts. The first 3 years of life, we must think about patterns. If you have kids, if you've watched kids grow and develop, nobody obsesses on hip range of motion or bicep strength. If these children, as they grow and develop, are making their developmental milestones, we don't worry about things. Only when your child misses a developmental milestone, the ability to move in a predicted pattern, that we start to worry. We go down the rabbit hole and look at the parts within that pattern and see what's broken. Is this a body part or is it motor control and processing? There's another time. It's vital when we look at patterns. If one of your loved ones has had a brain injury or a stroke, we look at patterns. And those patterns tell us how to work with them and how to basically take that beautiful plastic brain between their ears. And even in an unfortunate situation where damage has occurred to the body or the brain, that brain is ready to uptake new information in a completely new and plastic way. Now here's the unfortunate thing. Everywhere else in life, orthopedics, sports, fitness, physical education, we assume the brain is optimized and proceed to just develop muscle. I'm getting ready to give you the next 10 years of my life. Movement literacy. If we fix this, it will fix most of the problems you have in your particular sport, but it also fixes rehabilitation and it also fixes physical education. Movement literacy is simply like any other type of literacy. It doesn't mean you can do anything well. It means that in the right environment you can learn. If you cannot read and I drop you in the Library of Congress, I pick you up a year from now, you're pretty much the same person. However, I drop you in the Library of Congress and you can read, you are a completely different person. You have responded and adapted to the information, the material before you because you were literate with reading the symbols of letters and words and punctuation, and that had meaning for you. Now, if your movement abilities fall below the cut, even in an environment that makes other people grow, you won't grow. You'll either stay the same, you won't adapt, or most of the time we see you're potentially at risk because you're putting yourself in situations where you don't have a feedback loop and everybody else does. So the movement screen for me has been that defining line. In physical therapy, if I rehabilitate you and can't get you movement literate, you are by law disabled. And I have to give you assistive devices or help you acquire some type of ergonomic help or get you on disability. But what happens if you graduate high school having had one of the PE teachers that was more interested in rolling out the ball and texting somebody than developing your movement literacy? And you graduate from high school, you can't touch your toes, but you don't even know how to make that happen. You've got to consult a professional to do that. Or you find yourself a little bit heavy 2 years into college. You've got to go on the internet to figure out how to deal with that. Now, we don't have to go to Google to figure out how to add, subtract, and write sentences and create punctuation. We are at least literate enough when we graduate high school to do that. But you give me any health, fitness, or performance problem, and I am not enabled from my physical education platform to do anything with that with professional help. So if you think about the true purpose of education, it is to create both independence and sustainability. Okay? We don't do that in physical education. And because we don't do that, I've built an entire career on pro athletes flying from all over the world to see me. And instead of working on that specific thing that they complain about and the people who sent them to me, instead of worrying about that, I go back through the vital signs of movement: mobility and motor control, postural alignment, sensory feedback, balance, all those things, fundamental things. And the movement screen very often catches what's wrong with them. Or something simple like the Y-balance test catches what's wrong. Now, I don't care whether it's a pro football franchise or Red Bull. They fly them in here. They think I'm looking at speed skating or looking at a wide receiver. I'm not. I'm looking to see, does this person have movement literacy? They've been given a rich sensory experience in their specialized focus. Are all their receptors open? And we know that a body that's been in professional athletics is going to have bumps and bruises and problems. I've got to quickly run through a bunch of filters and find out how many of these things aren't going to change, how many of these things can potentially change, and if I change them, does it change that other thing that they're worried about? The feedback loops that you create for yourself are what are going to distinguish you in the future. I knew for a fact that just because I got your ankle moving again in rehabilitation, I didn't automatically assume that I restored your squat. I wanted a feedback loop that showed me how bad your squat was on the front end and how good it was on the back end. And if my only action was ankle mobility, then I know what the bottleneck was to your squat. But if I restored your ankle mobility and you still couldn't squat, even though I created more sensory information at the ankle, your glutes, your core, your pelvis wasn't doing the right thing with the information. So now we need to do some squat corrective training, because even with adequate information, you're not processing well. The entire movement screen, the Y-balance test, the selective functional movement assessment, these are simply things to give me a tighter feedback loop, because as strength conditioning professionals, as physical therapists, we are often in the position to appraise our own work. And guess what? You're always going to do a good job.
For more on this and other great topics, visit functionalmovement.com.